All right, we are live. So again, we're starting simple, and we're getting more advanced as the modules progress. Last time we talked about the three main principles of nutrition coaching: flexibility, accuracy, and consistency. Which is where, if those are in balance, the student will see success. If they're imbalanced, the student will not see success. They might see success for a short period of time, as many do, but the success won't last for as long as it ought to last. And today we're going to go over the basics of energy balance. And when I talk energy balance, I just mean calories. So calorie balance. Even to this day, people will try to convince you either subtly or overtly that this doesn't work, but it works. It works every time. It's just not fancy. It's very simple work. For some people, it may be too simple for them to kind of get. Right? It's so simple that there's got to be a different, more complicated answer. But there's no fancy, tricky work to it. It's a very simple energy balance. We're going to talk about two methods of estimating maintenance intake. One is going to be cool for you guys to try on yourself, and the other one is more how it works when we get a new student. We're talking about different rates of weight loss, weekly weight loss, and we're going to talk about the big macros: protein, carbs, and fats. But the language we're going to use is going to be more for how you would explain it to a student, with a little bit of kind of physiology, but not too heavy onto the physiology part. And then we're going to be talking about different ways of breaking down someone's caloric intake throughout the week. And then we're going to talk about refeeds. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Okay. Very simply put, if you were to write a diet book that covers 100% of the population without getting into any physiology and the blood work and stuff like that, it would be this slide 100 times repeated over and over and over again. If your intake is more than what you expend, you will gain weight. If your intake is below what you expend, you will lose weight. And if your intake and your expenditure matches, you will stay the same. Repeat, 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 repeat. I swear I'm eating 1,200 calories and I'm not losing weight. You are not eating 1,200 calories. It's that simple. Now, that might not be the best coaching strategy, but that's different from the actual physiological laws that are being applied. Now, if not all weight gain is bad weight gain, muscle gain is good weight to gain. Not all weight loss is good weight loss. Bone mass atrophy, muscle loss is not good weight loss. Right, so there are subtleties to it. There are the macro ratios do matter. The nutrient density of the foods do matter. So it's not just quality versus quantity. It is both. You need good quality and you need the appropriate quantities. And these numbers always change. These numbers change based on what you're doing, what state of life you're in, if you're in menopause, if you're not in menopause, if you're changing jobs, if you're going from a sedentary job to a very active job, or vice versa. All these things change, right? If you've gained some weight and you're no longer carbohydrate tolerant as you once were when you were younger, your macro ratios change. If you come down with something that's going on with your kidneys and you can't get away with a higher protein intake, your protein intake will need to come down. If Dr. Ellis finds that you are deficient in certain fats, your fat intake will come up higher, right? So there are moving pieces to all of these, but when you step back and look at the big picture, if you were to kind of fly it over and kind of see everything all at once, this is what it looks like: intake and expenditure, and what do they relate to each other. If a weight loss is achieved, a caloric deficit was present. So if they say, well, once I eliminated X food, I lost weight. The key is once they eliminated, meaning reduced. So once I quit soda, I lost 20 pounds. It's got to be soda. It's not soda, although that is not a healthy food for you. It is the giant caloric bomb that is associated with every can or every bottle. Okay. Now, when someone loses an extreme amount of weight through carbohydrate reduction, we're going to talk about this a little later. Carbohydrates also come with water retention. So it's not just loss from the caloric reduction, it's water loss from the absence of carbohydrates. Which is why when you also load carbohydrates, you're also loading water into the tissues and glycogen. If a deficit is reported, and I'm using quotation marks, but no weight loss is observed, no deficit is in place. Now, the daily doesn't work. So if someone is in a deficit Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but is in a surplus Friday, Saturday, Sunday, depending on the size of the surplus and the size of the deficit, it could even out by the week's end. We call those weekday dieters. Now, you could probably, in your head, already name a dozen of your students who are weekday dieters who would complain either on an intake or a preview or on their initial workout that they're very good the first half of the week, and then the weekend everything gets derailed. Okay, and they come back on Mondays. Oh, I blew it this weekend. Well, you technically didn't blow it. Your deficit was gone. Right now, if they still netted a deficit by the end of the week's end, they didn't necessarily blow it because that one day may not have derailed everything. But that's why the data is really important for that weekly trend of their weight loss, like we did it last week, right? Or in week 1, we talk about week 1's weight versus week 2's weight. Okay, the daily doesn't really have much influence on what we're going to do. So the first method of establishing maintenance is the slower method, but it's more accurate. So I like coaches to do this one. The other version is the kind of the quick and dirty version that we do for students. But either way, everyone winds up doing this method if they're tracking, and I'll explain why in a second. So what you would do is you would track food and your weight for 14 days. A woman might need to take a little bit longer just because depending on where they are in their cycle. And what you would do is you would divide that intake by 14 to get a daily average. So let's say from day 1 to 14, on average, you were eating 1,900 calories. So Madison, you were eating 1,900 calories across those 14 days. Okay? And then what you do is you compare week 1's weight to week 2's weight. So week 1, you weighed 149. Week 2, you weighed 148.5. Now we have to make the assumption that half a pound was body fat. We won't really know, but that's the assumption we'll make. Does that make sense? So how many calories in 1 pound of fat? 3,500. 3,500. 1/2 pound is 1,750. Right? So there was a 1,750 calorie deficit spread across how many days? 14 days. 14 days, half a pound, approximately 1,750 calories. You can kind of get how it got there. Okay, there's a lot of math there, but it's really easy to kind of connect the dots. You take 1,750, divide that by 7 days, you have 250 calorie deficit per day. So this person was able to maintain an average of a 250 deficit across the 14 days, leading to a half a pound of weight loss. Then what you do is just add back the deficit to what they were average eating, which was 1,900. So 250 plus 1,900 equals a maintenance of 2,150. Cool? So now we know where maintenance actually is. Because we could do a variety of formulas. Some will underestimate, some will overestimate. But then this will kind of tell us in real time what your maintenance is. Without any influence from various formulas that aren't necessarily designed for you. The formulas are good as a starting point, but this will clean everything up. Now, even if I did the formula version, I'll know in 2 weeks, 14 days, how close or how far my formulas were, because they'll wind up doing this anyway. If they lost 3 pounds and they were only supposed to lose 1, I know my formula was off. If they gained weight when they were supposed to lose weight, my formula was off. If they lost at the appropriate rate, then I know my formula was kind of spot on. So the garage version is quicker and quicker but less accurate. This is the sort of the one that goes into the nutrition programs because we want to get them started. Okay, but again, like they'll wind up doing the 14-day one anyway, as long as they can do the program. Okay, so we're essentially doing a multiplier based on how active they are and how much they weigh. So we don't have to memorize these because these are for the nutrition program design, but if you want to, you can always go back and look at the recording and look at the formulas. But these formulas are just, there's many on the market, and they all kind of give you a starting point. Some are a little high, some are a little low, some are more accurate than others. The one we actually use in the training program uses fat mass and lean mass, so it doesn't just multiply body weight. For example, if you take two people, we talked about this last week, take two people with the same weight but different body compositions, their metabolic rates are different, right? So what we do is actually we find out how much lean mass they have, how much fat mass they have, and then get a little bit closer to the truth. But what do you think is wrong with that? Because in principle, it's good. Lean mass burns 12 calories per pound. Fat mass burns 2 calories per pound. But what is the problem with finding lean mass and fat mass? This might take a little thinking. How do I get that number?
Is it the methodology that you used to get it, like the calipers? Or
Yes. How did I arrive at the body fat percentage? Did they guess? Did I go off a photo? Did I use calipers? Did I DEXA? Did I BOD-POD? Did I use the Fit3D? So we have to understand that even the breakdown of fat mass and lean mass is an estimate. Okay, that's why I like photos. So if you can get a reliable photo of what someone looks like at 10%, 15%, 20%, but even that height, body structure will affect all that. So we have to kind of this is a huge estimate. So even if we're using lean mass and fat mass, it's still an estimate because we used an estimate to arrive at those numbers. Okay, so essentially what you need to know is this is a starting point before we do the 14 days. Because if I set Jared's student up with a 1 pound a week fat loss and they lost 2 pounds per week, I need to bring food up. Or back off on the expenditure, or determine if the person went rogue. Right? If the person went rogue and went off the plan in order to do something different, and I'm seeing something that I wasn't wanting to see, I would have to make that adjustment. Now, because we're not looking at the program every single day, that's why we have the nutrition programmer prompt you guys weekly now, or you guys would be looking at their sheet or their health kit or something to kind of see, okay, this doesn't look right or it looks good, because the goal is to keep the goal, right? Because once they start coming in 3 times a week, they get very good at training and doing all the different things. But we always have to remember what brought them in the door in the first place. Okay, so rates of fat loss. We have three rates. And this is based on body weight. So when you see these percentages, you would multiply them by your body weight. This is the way we did for Stark Naked. So 0.5%, 0.7%, and 1% of body weight. Okay, so if someone was about 200 pounds, it's easy to kind of figure out. If someone was 200 pounds, we got about 1 pound a week, 1.5 pounds a week, and 2 pounds a week, based on different rates. Okay, I can see Bianca's doing the math already. So times it by 0.5%.
Do I have to change just 0.5?
Yeah, just 0.5%.
How is that? 0.05. That's what I was thinking.
Okay. Yeah. Did I mess up? Yeah. So I messed up. It's 0.005. 0.05. That's not right either.
Oh, I had to move it too. That's what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay. Such just 0.005, 0.007, or.
Now, when we're quoting a certain fat loss, we always quote the slowest rate. Right? Does that make sense? Because we could achieve something faster, but there's no guarantee that they would do the behaviors necessary, or if it is even necessary to go at the fastest rate. Did I mess up the formulas?
I'm not sure. It might be us, though.
Let me
How
see.
do you do the 1?
Do it to the same.
The other way?
No.
Or did I just time?
No. You're so 200 on my 200 pounds times 0.5%. It automatically goes to 0.005 equals 1 pound a week. Your calculators might need updating.
So just do 0.00.
Yeah, you could do 0.005 or 0.007. So 0.007.
But then what would you do for 1?
0.01.
0.01.
Yeah, 0.01.
So that'd be 2.
Yeah, 2 pounds a week.
So just 1.
So let's take
Okay,
let's
okay,
let's
yeah.
take someone who weighs 185 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian, 185 jacked steel. At the 0.5 rate, that's almost a pound a week. Okay, that's almost a pound a week. Now, if we were just using food to create the deficit, now we could create the deficit two ways: through expenditure and through intake, and usually it's both. But the intake is the strongest one because the amount of calories you'll actually burn doing expenditure is going to be low when you consider like a weekly fat loss. So that's a 3,200 calorie deficit per week. Now, when we get into weekly options, that can be done a variety of ways. We could do low days, high days, cycling. We could do 7 days, same, and so on. But 3,200 calories a week. If you just Bianca, just take 3,200 divided by 7. 457 calorie deficit per day. It's noticeable, but it's not dramatic, right? So if you take your food, reduce it by 450, you'll lose about a pound a week if you're at this person. Like some people have commented on my weight loss. It's like, well, it's easy when you eat less, you know? And so 0.7 would be 1.3 pounds per week. So it's faster, so it looks sexier. Looks more appealing. But what you see is that it comes with a cost. There is no free lunch. And this is something that students need to understand, is that there is always a cost. Like there is a receipt that is due. There is like the account needs to be paid. 4,500 calorie deficit per day. So if you do 4,500, divide that by 7.
Hang on.
Mm-hmm.
650.
650. So it's a larger chunk. So if your BMR or your total daily energy expenditure is 1,500 because you're small, or let's say it's 2,500, now you got to go below 2,000 in order to lose 4,500 calories a week. Or you do a smaller deficit and you do more expenditure, but you're doing a lot of cardio like every single day. So either way, it becomes uncomfortable. But then we match it to what is the goal? Is the goal to lose a great deal of weight in a short period of time? What are you prepared to do? And then are we prepared for a transition plan once that's done? Okay. The highest rate, 1.85 pounds per week, so it's almost 2 pounds a week. So in 4 weeks, we're almost down 10 pounds. A 6,500 calorie deficit per day, or I'm sorry, per week.
925.
Right? So that's almost half if someone is eating 2,000 calories. That's half. It can be done.
Not worth it.
It could be done, but at what cost? Right? So many of these people have families, jobs that require mental energy. If they're already snacking here and there, these snacking urges will get amplified. If they already diet Monday through Thursday and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday they go out, they're going to go out and go overboard because they're eating 1,000 calories per day, or they're in a 1,000 calorie deficit per day, right? So it is attractive mathematically on the fat loss side, but it is not attractive on the cost. It is a very high price. Okay, which is why the slow and steady rate gets them there with a little less, fewer scratches, and they're better able to maintain it. Protein, essentially, protein. If any of you were kids, I don't know if they have this in Brazil. Do they have Legos in Brazil? Okay, and if you're who's a parent? Brian's a parent. Austin's gonna be playing with the Legos. You're gonna step on them with a bare foot, and you'll never forget that feeling. So protein is essentially the dietary form of Legos. If you want to build a structure, you need building blocks. Okay, the more complicated the structure, the more pieces you'll need. Okay? And when someone comes in and says, okay, we're going to diet, and starts throwing blocks out the window, you have fewer blocks to make your structure with. So when we're dieting, we cannot sacrifice protein intake because we need those blocks. We need the structure to maintain, so we can't lose bone mass, we can't lose muscle mass, and protein is the only macronutrient that can provide building blocks for those things. So when someone comes and says, "Okay, we're gonna clean the house, Junior. What do you want to go?" It's like, do not throw my Legos. I need those. You can throw away the He-Man. Okay. Carbohydrates and fats are expendable calories. Protein is not expendable when it comes to dieting. Does that make sense? Because those are the only ones that we can use to build the structure. So greater levels of activity and reduced calories increase protein requirements. You don't need as much protein when you're just kind of chilling out. You need more protein when you start doing stuff or when you start taking food away. Okay. There's something called a protein-sparing modified fast, where people are like on 400, 500 calories per day to lose an extreme amount of weight loss. This is like a life-saving intervention, but protein is kept very, very high. Protein protects against lean mass losses. It provides satiety, a feeling of fullness, which is why we try to limit the amount of shakes that they can have. So if you have 50 grams of a shake, it's very easy, very convenient, but it leaves you wanting more very shortly after, versus eating an 8-ounce piece of salmon, which is 48 grams of protein, but it's a very different feeling of satiety, because you have to chew it, you have to digest it, you have to eat it, versus just drinking it. And protein has a slightly higher thermic effect of food, so that it takes some energy to process the protein down. Optimal protein. Now, here's a cool thing about protein, though. It has a huge range of what works. Now, I'm sure you've heard the Stark Naked Radio. You have different guests that say you should have a low protein diet. Some other, voices will say you need a higher protein diet, and then there's people that kind of in the between, and they're all can be right. It's just who we're talking about and what physiology we're talking about, because we don't really know until we start doing stuff. Like, I've been on the high protein side, I've been on the moderate protein side, I'm currently existing on the lower protein side. And thus far, there hasn't been any negative effects, but then the regular blood work will tell us that. So if protein needs to come back up, it can come back up. But if I can operate well and be healthy with a lower protein intake, that's better for my economy. Because a high protein diet, especially when it's grass-fed organic, can be troublesome. But if I need it for my health, then that's something that will need to be considered. So we can go from anywhere from 1.3 times body weight. So if you think of someone like Jared, who weighs what you weigh, multiplied by 130%, that's a lot of protein per day. Okay. Then we have a more moderate, which is 1 gram per pound of target body weight. So if you were weighing 200 pounds, but your goal is to weigh 150, just set your target at 150. Okay. And then there's 0.64 to 0.8 grams per pound, which is on the lower end. So for a 185-pound person, anywhere from 120 to 150. And you would look at that like, that's really low protein, but do you need more? Are you getting stronger in the gym? Are you losing bone mass? Are you fatigued? Is your blood work just going haywire? All those things would let us know that this is not enough, or it is enough. When someone starts reducing their protein intake and starts PRing on their squat, I mean, that's fine for me, because I know they're gaining bone mass through their legs because of the tension that's on the bar. Now, carbohydrates, in a word, is energy, providing fuel. Now, different cars require different types of gas, and different cars have different gas tanks. Some have very small gas tanks that can't handle a lot of fuel, and some are Hummers and they can handle a lot of fuel, Ford Expeditions and so on, right? If assuming they're all lean, it's the size of the lean mass that counts. The more lean mass you have, the more carbohydrates you can tolerate. The less lean mass you have, the less carbohydrates you can tolerate. The less body fat you have, the more carbohydrates you can tolerate. The more body fat you have, the less carbohydrates you can tolerate. The more active you are, the more carbohydrates you can tolerate. The less active you are, the less carbohydrates and they're all intersecting.
That's why Crystal can eat 3 cupcakes.
Yeah,
Not bad enough.
yeah. Like Crystal is a female version of Rolandis. Like Rolandis gets stark naked ready eating in and out, whereas Someone like myself has to like, you know, pepperoncinis and salads and tunas and crab and if I have a carb, it's like a 1 carb pancake, something like that. I got to use no carb syrup and stuff like that. I'm struggling because everyone has different physiologies. But as I got leaner, I was able to tolerate more carbohydrates, which allowed me to train, which was cool. But it's always in flux. Now, someone sent me an Instagram where you kind of find your metabolic ID, or you're a carb type, or you're a fat type, or you're a protein type. You know what I mean? Those will change all the time. If you are heavy and you get lean, you become more of a carb type. You have the potential to become more of a carb type. If you are lean and then you gain weight over time, you become less of a carb type. Does that make sense? And so the recommendation is based on the individual. So you can go as low as 30 grams, or because the minimal intake for carbohydrates is 0, because it is a non-essential macro. Non-essential doesn't mean not fun, and doesn't mean not useful. You tell a Tour de France cyclist that they don't need any carbohydrates, that are at 0, they're not gonna get 500 meters, right? So the minimal is 0, but that doesn't mean optimal. So optimal will range. So I've seen intakes as high as 400, 500, 600. The non-keto, so once we start going below 100 grams, we're getting into ketogenic world. It starts happening more and more below 50, 30, 35. But to keep your kind of non-keto carb intake, we're about 100 grams. Okay. And now here's another option, is if we want to increase the amount of carbohydrates based on their workload. So let's say everyone in the room gets 100 grams. So we're all at 100 grams. And Crystal's not already suffering, because that would be probably a carb reduction. But let's just say we all have kind of the same general physiology. We're all generally overweight, and we're not all gifted, right? And we haven't earned more carbohydrates, right? So we would add 5 grams for every 2 sets. Yes, there's a difference between squats and biceps curls, but we're not going to get that. There's a difference between 2 sets on the sled and 2 sets on the lateral raise. We get it. I get that, right? So, for example, one program has 83 sets in the week. It's like 25, 20, about 30, 30, 30 almost across the week, right? 83 divided by 2 is 40, 41 sets. Times 5 is an extra 200 grams they could have on workout days. So on workout days, they could have 300 grams, 200 plus 100, and on the other 4 days, they drop back to 100. That's a very old school way of doing carb cycling. You're training harder, or you're training, you get more carbs. If you're not training, you get less carbs.
Like a high day, low day?
Yeah, like a high day, low day. That's just an option. Or you take an average, so 300 times 3 days, 400 times 4 days. What is that? Divided by 7, it's about 185 grams per day. So it's less complicated because there's less moving parts, but it's a little higher than the minimum, and it's a little high, and it's a little lower than the jackpot days. Because if I was doing option 1, I'd make sure I was working out on a Saturday, because I want a higher intake day on a Saturday. Okay, but if you have a little bit of a higher intake 7 days a week, then it makes it more simple. Because what are we trying to have them do? Are we trying to have them try to juggle several balls in the air, or be narrowly focused on a couple of things? Okay. And again, that's based on who's walking in the door. So if they have a goal of getting to 6% body fat, joining the Olympics, and winning the Kentucky Derby or whatever, and they want to train twice a week and not log their food, like, hey, let's reconnect you to what's realistic. Because I don't think you know what's realistic. Fats will protect your organs for insulation. They provide heat, provides cushion on impact. So if someone wants to stick a sword in your side, it provides some protection for your vital organs. So having a little body fat in your belly would be beneficial. That's actually one of the theories on why men have more body fat around the midsection. It's not just for providing energy during long hunts, but it's also to protect vital organs because they're always in battle. Men are always fighting. That's just like an evolutionary theory. But then it's a little less clear. But for women, it's more clear why they carry body fat in the hips and the breasts because of childbirth. It's a little bit more clear, but men, they don't really know. So fats kind of fill in the rest. Now fats have a high satiety, not a high satiety, but a high reward in mouthfeel. So fatty foods have a good response to when the food is in the mouth, especially when it's mixed with sugar. So if you look at the most palatable, rewarding foods, it's foods with higher fat, higher sugar. Cakes, cookies, ice creams. So once it hits the mouth, the brain just kind of lights up like a Christmas tree. Okay. So these foods are also higher in calories, and they start sparking a reward cycle. And we talked about this a little bit last week. Like you want the kid to do well in the school assignment, you give them junk food or a sweet. If you want them to be quiet, you give them the sweet. You give them the food. And then these patterns start to stick with us as we get into adulthood and later on. And then maybe it shifts from ice cream to alcohol, and then or it stays with junk food. But it just takes a more of a sophisticated turn. So when you were younger, it might have been Oreos, but now it's butter cake from Mastro's. Right, so it's still the same thing. It's still the same fat and sugar combination, but it's a little bit more sophisticated, right? But it's still 1,500 calories, however you slice it. So on the bottom bullet says more carbs equals less fat, more fat equals less carbs. So on the nutrition plan, carbs and fats are not bold. Protein and calories are bold. It's not bold because they're not important. It's not bold because they're malleable. They can move around. So depending on the day, if I had more sweet potato, I'd have less avocado. On a day where I had more avocado or cheese or whatever, I'd have less rice. Okay, and if I had alcohol, I would have less of both, but protein doesn't go anywhere, and calories don't go anywhere either, which is where people get into trouble. So it's not alcohol by itself; it's alcohol and the snacking, and then more alcohol and then more snacking, and less activity, especially the next day because they're, let's say, fatigued, they're dehydrated, or they're hungover, and they don't quite learn the lesson. So here are some weekly options for intake. Option 1 is 7 days, same intake. So the calories that we established for you, so let's say Brian's going to eat 2,100 calories per day. It's 2,100 calories across 7 days. Same. It's easy to do. It's easier to do. It may be more challenging on those weekend days, but it's less moving parts. Then we have 6 days low, 1 day higher. And that high day can move wherever it is. Like it can be on a Sunday, it can be on a Wednesday. If I have the white party on a Saturday, so I might do my high day there. But if I have date night on a random Thursday, I might do it there. If I have both in the same week, I'll have to choose. Which is where we got into we're going to get into the idea of competing goods, right? Competing rewards. Which one do you want more? Do you want to have the higher intake twice? Or do you want this rate of fat loss, which will not be the same if you do that thing? Or do you want the higher rate of fat loss and risk disappointing your friends or whomever is, really looking forward to going to the bar with you? Does that make sense? There's always a cost. It may not be a large cost, but there's the road to fat loss is filled with forks in the road. Every few steps, there's a fork in the road, left or right. Next one, left or right. Next one, left or right. It's never one straight path with a few deviations. It's always like, okay, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? Especially your students who have been out of a proper body composition for a while. They have a lot of behaviors that they'll have to unwind, and those behaviors are like stuck to them. And those behaviors, even though they might not like their behaviors, give them little pieces of gratitude. or like they feel good about them. The example of someone who is in a destructive job, it pays the bills. Like they want to leave the job, but the job pays the bills, and they're looking out for their family or their quality of life, whatever that might be. Okay, we do 5 days low, 2 days high, which is good for the Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday option. But Monday through Friday is low. Monday through Friday has to be lower to allow for 2 days higher. Now, so someone who's doing the 6 day low, 1 day high, who wants to do 2 days high that week can do it, but those other 5 days have to be lower than they would be for the 6. Does that make sense? It's just budgeting. It's not sexy. It's very simple. Just got to check the boxes. But between checking the boxes are a lot of deep-rooted behavioral stuff that needs to get dealt with.
Yeah, the 5-2 is hard.
Yeah, the 5-2 is hard.
Like either crawling towards Friday.
Yeah. But it doesn't always have to be 5-2. It could all be in 1 week. It could be 5-2 because there's 2 things happening that week, and the next week there'd be nothing, so it's 7 days high. But that takes a sophisticated coaching and sophisticated person to be able to do that stuff, right? And again, we're talking about, okay, what are the behaviors that need to be in place here? We have workout days, non-workout days. So 3 days they work out, they have a higher intake. 4 days they don't work out, they have a lower intake. The high days are primarily from carbs. So this is carb cycling, carb manipulation, but it doesn't have to be that. But it's better if that is usually the case versus fat loading. Like they just have higher fat intake because fat won't replenish glycogen, muscle glycogen. But the weekly average, regardless of what you choose, will be the same as the 7 day linear. And I'll show you some examples. So 7 days linear, someone's going to eat 2,000 calories per day for 7 days. It's cool, huh? Yeah. On the 6 day low, 1 day high, they'll do 6 days at about 1,900, 1 day at 2,500. The weekly average is 2,000. On the 5 days low, 2 days high, they'll do 1,800 for 5 days, which is rough. 2,500 for 2 days, weekly average 2,000. On the workout days, they'll get 2,350 calories. On the non-workout days, it's even lower at 1,750. At weekly average 2,000. So just pick your poison. Which one do you want? Right? Well, I want to do 2,500 every day. Well, you won't lose weight. That's fine. That's easy. Done. Let's pull a sled. No, I want to lose this. Okay. Pick one. And I'll help you manage it. So one may not be for you, but one you might really like. You might like the 5-2. Because you may not be a big eater until the weekend hits, and then when the weekend hits, I kind of roll up your sleeves a little bit, but I'll give you more room. But you still have a budget. There is still, you got to be home by midnight, or the carrot turns into a pumpkin or an onion, or whatever it is. Like, remember your fairy tales. There's always a catch.
It's pumpkin. You mix Shrek and Cinderella, but I like that.
Right. There's always a catch. Like, you got to get the kiss by the 3rd day. You got to be home by midnight. You cannot tell a lie. There's always a catch. And a lot of students, even though they are paying for a certain service or a certain direction, will think there's no catch. Like there's no condition. There's no fine print. But we're not trying to make a fine print. It's bold. Like we can make this happen, but it's going to take a certain effort and certain discomfort initially. And in the end, the goal is to be comfortable and have what you want. But to get there, it will require some discomfort. But that's why you're not alone. That's why Dr. Alice is here. That's why I'm here. Your coach is here. That's why Ashley and the reception team is here. Whatever you need. That's why the doctors are here, right? To provide that for you. That's why we have podcasts to help educate you and help coach you through the other 23 hours out of the day. I had a guy. I think I talked about this last time I spoke with you. He's like driving home. I haven't eaten in a while. I'm starving. Like, oh man, the junk food sounds really good. I just want to eat some mac and cheese. It's like, or sweets or Oreos or Snickers or whatever. It's like, okay, go to Burger King, drive through, order whatever you're going to order, find the first homeless person you meet and give it to him. Then go home, be grateful for what you have, and make a salad. and it's not a response that they would have ever expected. It's like, you haven't eaten in a couple of days, they haven't eaten in a couple of weeks. They're gonna wonder where their bed is gonna be tonight. You know where yours is. It's right on PCH, right? So you help frame. What are we? You haven't eaten in a couple hours? Big deal. That's okay. Plan better next time. But you can still serve. You can still serve. Right? So you help bring them back to, okay, this is a goal that I have because I am in a really cool place where I can actually worry about my abs versus how am I going to feed myself tonight, kind of thing, right? Or how am I going to make this next day without getting stabbed, kind of thing. You like there's difficulties and then there's difficulties. So when you help coach their, like, they're like, man, my trainer gives it to me. Like, she makes me pull the sled, but then she also tells me to, like, suck it up and go home and make a salad. You know, and, like, take some soup to charity. Like, that's, like, my trainer is, like, trying to make me not only a more fit and healthy person, but also a better person. And that's where the nutrition coaching and just fitness coaching in general takes a very different light. You know, it's what you do with those other 23 hours. High days, primarily from carbohydrates, will increase body weight in the short term. Like we said earlier, 1 gram of carbohydrate brings 3 grams of water with it. So if Jared's going to have a party at his home for a birthday party.
Hell yeah.
And he invites all of us, but every one of us brings 3 friends. That's the same thing. Okay. Now the difference is, what we have to consider is the 3 guests don't make a mess. They're just there. Feels a little bit more cramped, and when everyone leaves, they're gone. That's water. Water comes in, water comes out. It's not body fat. Body fat will linger. Body fat's gonna want to, like, stay on the couch. Okay. Body fat's going to create damage, either cosmetic damage or start to create inflammation and stuff like that. But water just kind of comes in, kind of comes out. Comes in, comes out. You have your lady cycle, comes in, comes out. You get bloated, it's uncomfortable, then it's gone. But it doesn't linger like body fat would. So when someone loses body weight or, like, reduces carbohydrates, they're losing that water. So on the scale, it might look more impressive, but it's not true body fat. It's just some body fat and some water, and a lot of water. And when they gain weight on the scale after a higher carb day, it's again more water and glycogen. It's not body fat, especially if they're just bringing their calories to maintenance. Right? If Madison's maintenance is 2,800 and she goes to 2,750, it's not body fat gain. That's anything that goes up on the scale. It's more food in the stomach, more glycogen, more water, not body fat. Now, if she goes above that, now we're getting into storage. Refeeds are psychological breaks, not necessarily physiological breaks from caloric restriction. Diet breaks are more physiological. This is where we actually take a week to 2 week break from dieting. Okay. Depending on how long we've been dieting for and who the person is. If they're heavier, they can go for longer without a diet break. If they're leaner, they need diet breaks more frequently. Women need diet breaks more frequently than men do. Okay. Women don't tolerate dieting, which is weird because they're the ones most likely to diet. But they don't recognize that they're not just small versions of guys. Well, I wouldn't say they don't recognize it. They're not being told this, right? They're just being considered smaller version of guys, and they can do whatever guys do, and they're going to get the same results, which don't work. They're very unique, which means they have different things, different requirements, and part of that is more frequent diet breaks or more frequent refeeds. Some students have a hard time with refeeds because they don't know when to stop. And for that type of person, we would want to avoid having a refeed, more of a kind of a freebie meal. They just kind of go out and they have a meal and that's it. It's not quite a refeed. It's not quite a cheat meal. It's just kind of an unscripted meal that they have and they return to normal. Might be more beneficial for that person, at least initially, until they get a better relationship with food and what they're trying to cover up for, why they can't say no to something. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions? All right. That's all I have.